Western Europe and the United States, the debate is about abundance and health issues and nutrition issues and wellness issues that stem from abundance, and frankly from in some cases cheap food. In the rest of the world, the debate is about scarcity and how do we manage stability in our country? How do we protect governments from the instability that comes from staggeringly high food prices, environmental practices that are devastating the ability to produce food in the future? So we're fortunate to be in a state that has been blessed with opportunities to produce 300 different commodities, all of which are good for you. Your mother would be proud for you to eat them. We produce them at a time of the year when most of the rest of the country and much of the world is incapable of producing. And so we are focused on how do we continually maximize Florida's potential in food and fiber and foliage production, and how do we continue to sustain an industry that for 500 years has been a part of Florida's economy and culture. We have focused over the years since coming into this office on a couple of those key issues. One is water, and you're going to spend a lot of time on that today, and I really applaud your commitment to that issue. There is no more important long-term issue facing Florida than water, whether it's for agriculture, for development, for the environment. Regardless of your primary mission in life, water will dictate future plans for our state. And when I sat here on this committee and on the Water Committee and Environmental Protection Committee as a member, water wars were something that were in limited, sporadic parts of the state. Today, there is no part of Florida that is not engaged in some degree anyway, of conflict over that resource. You look at the ecological and economic collapse of Apalachicola Bay, that is inherently a shortage of water coming from Georgia, and all of the problems that stem from that. The conflict between Northeast Florida and the Swanee Valley over our spring sheds and groundwater and withdrawals. The conflicts in the Tampa Bay area that people have been familiar with for decades, but frankly, because they were sort of the first to have the conflict, they have shown us the way forward in some regional partnerships. The very complex system in South Florida, beginning with the northern Everglades and the Kissimmee Basin that ends up in the lake, that ends up in the Everglades, and all of the complicated issues that stem from that to support the environment, the tribes, the industry, and future urban growth. So water has to be a focus of any discussion about agriculture, because in a water war, agriculture loses the most and agriculture loses first. For other users, technology shows a way forward in terms of alternative water supplies frequently. In agriculture, the technology that we have invested heavily in as growers has been in conservation, in using substantially less water through drip irrigation, microjet, all kinds of technologies over the years that have reduced our water consumption and are bringing agriculture down as the number one water user in the state as urban growth takes over that number one position. So water is a driving force in that. Second issue is nutrition. I testified before Senate Ag yesterday, and I walked back to the office, and I was struck by the fact that when I was on the Ag Committee, we struggled to make our issues relevant to urban members, to people who had inner cities, to people who had densely populated areas, and they believed that ag issues were really secondary issues for their constituents. And I was struck by the fact that yesterday's meeting was dominated by questions about how we can get more fresh agricultural products and create jobs and develop farmers markets and develop store inventories of fresh from Florida items in communities that are considered food deserts. The discussion had come 180 degrees, which I think is helpful to agriculture long term, because we're now establishing our relevance to people's economic security, their quality of life, and the future of their kids. And Florida agriculture is well positioned to fill those roles. whether it's in the school nutrition program, which many of you helped us take a leadership role and took the state into a leadership role for the country in terms of caring about what our kids eat and having it come from more locally high-quality produce providers, but also what we're doing to take products from the fields that are not going into the commercial space and divert it into food banks and faith communities and senior centers and a whole host of other programs where farmers are feeding hungry Floridians, and we're reducing waste, which is something that everybody can wrap their arms around and be very proud of. So the nutrition piece and wellness is going to help us bend that cost curve of health care that all of you have to wrestle with on the Appropriations Committee and with your budget challenges. We continue to be a state that will be under assault from pests and diseases, whether it's the avocado industry in Homestead, the citrus industry throughout the Ridge and the Flatwoods and the Indian River, the hedges along Palm Beach and A1A, the pythons in the Everglades. I mean, I could spend all day talking about the things that are environmental threats, they are economic threats, they are public health threats because of the consequences of us having mild winters and being a destination for tens of millions of international visitors, cargo, having major airports and seaports, all of which are supportive of our diverse economy, but we have to recognize the consequences that come from that and invest in technologies and infrastructure to mitigate that risk that as we speak today, a risk that threatens our signature crop, citrus, threatens tropical fruits in South Florida, particularly in South Dade, threatens in the fragile ecosystems in the Everglades, just as three or four examples. So pest and disease continues to be, I think, a focus for anybody who cares about agricultural policy and environmental policy in the state of Florida. We have to continue to be aggressive in promoting what we have in Florida, and we have invested heavily because of your support in the Fresh from Florida program. Fresh from Florida products are now found in 120 countries. New trade agreements have opened up avenues where we're not playing as much defense on new international trade agreements, and we're actually taking what Florida produces and exporting that, whether it's Ocala horses to South Korea or orange juice into Latin America, which is kind of an interesting turn of events. And we're excited about discussions that are coming out of Washington about potential bilateral agreements with the EU, because when you're talking about agreements with a consumer base that can afford to buy what we produce in Florida, then you're going to negotiate a more even trade deal than what we've had in the past. And when we negotiate those trade deals, our department is committed to supporting Floridians in making sure that our government enforces those agreements, such as the resolution that recently came about in the tomato conflict between the domestic producers and the Mexican importers, and the way that we have at least come to some conclusion on that for the time being. So those are the key issues: pest and disease, the water issues, the nutrition issues, continuing to focus on marketing and promotion. We think that the future for Florida agriculture is bright. There are very significant challenges out there, but with your commitment and your continued support, we think that that this will continue to be a pillar of Florida's economy, just as it has been for the last 500 years. It will be for another 500 years. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.